close up the presenters part of this very cool conference in this gorgeous city of Denver. We're going to end on a mile-high note with, thank you, with Adam Chambers of Digital Surgeons. Yesterday, Kevin talked about breaking work up to make it more manageable for humans, morale, sanity. And Julian showed us microservices that break things up in the back for flexibility, power, clarity. Now, Adam is going to show us, I think, breaking things up in the front. He's originally a Londoner, but now he lives in New Haven. He's been there 5 years, him and the missus. He started in web development coming from music, like many people seem to. He was an audio engineer, and like Rick Ellis himself, who wrote apparently ExpressionEngine, well, the precursor to ExpressionEngine, working as an audio engineer sitting in a hotel somewhere. And also, bizarrely, like Rick, he's an enthusiast of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Derek told us that Rick just opened up a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu studio, so I thought that was an interesting coincidence. Well, that's it. Here's Adam.
Hello, is this working? Is it loud enough? Yeah? All right, cool. Give me 1 second just to set up. I'm going to try and use this iPad as a remote, so we'll see how that goes. Oh, it worked. Awesome. So that's really bright. I've got to stop walking in front of that. Cool. So yeah, my name is Adam Chambers. I'm Creative Technology Director at Digital Surgeons. As Adam said, we're based out in New Haven, and we do a lot of different creative design work and marketing. Originally from London, moved to New Haven to work more closely with the team around 5 years ago. And I lead up a team of full-stack engineers. We work with a variety of platforms and frameworks and content management systems, but Digital Surgeons, the company, has been involved in ExpressionEngine for quite a few years now. And so today, I want to talk about component-driven design, and it's something, and development, and it's something that's pretty close to my heart. So I'm going to start with the why, like this man said to do, and then I'm going to get out this Keynote file, fire up some code, and finish off the presenter part of ExpressionEngine Conference 2017, how it should be done, knee-deep in nerdery. So first we'll go through some ExpressionEngine configuration. Then I'm going to go into some kind of integration with super cool front-end tooling, which is what I'm really into. So a bit of post-CSS and BEM syntax, some Vue.js, and then might be a little overlap with Antoinette's talk right at the end. I'm going to dive into React and an awesome framework called Next, which runs on Node.js. So let's get started. Remember these? Books. I'm kidding. I do love physical books. I read a lot. But the concept of the page has been with us for thousands of years. And the technology has changed over time from papyrus to paperback, and I guess now the pixel. But the concept of the page has stuck with us that whole time. And when the web was first introduced to the masses, concepts like pages and bookmarks, pagination, these things made it easier for people to explore this new world. But I think we're a world away from where the web started now, right? And the concept of the page has kind of outstayed its welcome, not only in how we think about content, but also in how we scope our web projects. So how many people here have been asked this kind of question before? Probably quite a few, right? Or something similar. How long to build a page? And it's... Next slide. Oh, we went past it. This one's a good one. Go on. We'll wait. It's worth it. Do I need to go back? There we go. Love that guy. It's frustrating, right? It depends. It depends what's going on that page. Is it just a masthead image and a block of text? Then you can have it right now. Or is it got a lot of interactivity and third-party integrations, APIs? It's going to take a hell of a lot longer. So really, it all depends about components, which is what I want to really talk about today. So it's much easier to think about content and to scope our web projects when we break it down into really small pieces and think about things in terms of components. And that's not to say that comping up pages in Sketch or Photoshop is going to go away. In fact, far from it. But once you have a set of components to work with, you can build as many pages as you like from there. Because all a page is really is a composition of components. And as Adam said, I'm a musician. I have it tattooed all over me just so people know. So this metaphor sits really nicely with me. I like to think of it as you have a set of components, which are like your notes, in a particular scale, which would be like your visual identity, and then you compose a melody, which would be like the page. And it just becomes much easier to reason about content and scope accurately when we think in this way. And so all a component is really is a modular, composable unit of user interaction. It's basically the UI version of a module. And modularity has been around for a long, long time in software engineering. It's that idea of doing one thing and doing one thing really well, and then composing all of these small things together to make a bigger thing. It's basically the Unix philosophy. I think I win awards for that meme. I'm proud of that one. But seriously, components have been around for a long time, and modules. In the world of web design, they've really started to take off recently. So you can kind of trace it back. We had like YUI and jQuery UI. These are like JavaScript widgets that you could just drop on a page and move around. Moving into things like Bootstrap and Foundation, which I think really started to get designers to think in terms of components. So that was a huge step forward. CSS preprocessors, Sass, post-CSS, which we use a lot of. And also some of the like object-oriented CSS, like BEM, which I'll go into a bit, I think brought some of that modularity and componentization to the archaic world of CSS. And then, as Antoinette was explaining, Node and NPM, I think, really kicked it into gear because, and Browserify, I should say, because that brought a lot of the Node tools to the browser, and then we could literally require a module and start to build them all together. And then you have frameworks like Angular and React. They have components and modules like at their core, especially React. And then I think the future, the holy grail is web components, which I'm not actually going to talk about too much today. I'm focusing on stuff that we do at Digital Surgeons. And I've played around with web components a lot. I'm super excited by them, but it doesn't seem quite stable enough yet. The specs changed a couple of times, not supported too widely. Polymer seems like a really cool framework. And I think I read at the end of this year, Polymer 3 is going to move to NPM and ES modules. So maybe when they do that, it will kick things forward. And in 2018, I'll come back and speak about web components. But for now, I'm going to leave those out of the equation. But I think having a native standard way to do components on the web is kind of what we should aim for. So back in '96, Bill Gates wrote an essay titled "Content is King." And he was basically saying on the internet the real money will be in content. And he was really right and way ahead of his time. But content has really changed. The web's come on a long way, and content has really changed. We have so many devices and mediums and platforms now. It made me think on the plane on the way here, I had 4 devices out, all connected to Wi-Fi, all on different platforms and social networks, and I'm sure in this room we have tons. And so users have become smarter and kind of more aware, and they expect great content now. And they expect more, and they expect it when they want it. And so at DS, we tend to say story is king, because like I said, users have come to expect good content, and what they want now is compelling story. And they want it on any of those devices, right? And so as designers and developers, really context is king. The how is so important today. Content creators need to be able to create content and deliver it to any device, any medium, at any time. And so when it comes to building tools for our clients to go ahead and create this content, tools like Bootstrap, Foundation, and even our beloved Gumby framework at Digital Surgeons, these are all great tools, but they don't quite cut it in what we're trying to do at DS now. And that's not a knock to any of these tools. I love all of them, especially Gumby. It's my baby for years. But they serve a different purpose. And I think Dave Rupert from Paravel, who's a great developer, he put it really well and said that we essentially need to create tiny bootstraps for every client, or tiny boilerplates. And so we have, you can check this out, this is on our GitHub at Digital Surgeons. It's like an open source boilerplate, and we take this and we use it for all of our clients, and it kind of kicks off a project, and we build custom UI on top of that. And we actually modify it to work with different CMSs, which when I get out of this keynote, I'll show you. But so tiny bootstraps, tiny boilerplates. What we're really trying to do is design systems. And so we need to build design systems, style guides, with guidelines that our clients can kind of take and run with, right? And create content on the fly, ship fast, and get that stuff out to their users. So here's kind of a couple examples we've done at DS recently. This is for Camelback, who are an awesome brand. You can see how we're kind of building out these small bootstraps. A sort of style guide for Dale Carnegie. And then this was a really fun one. This is a UI kit for a company called Skillsoft, and we're actually building this for their developers, their in-house team, to be able to take these small components that we built and use them in their own applications. So it's really code-focused. So this is a content management system conference, so you're probably thinking, like, what about CMS? How does this all kind of tie into the content management world? Well, it started with the WYSIWYG, right? That's WordPress in the background there. And this definitely isn't a dig at WordPress. I actually love WordPress. It's a very different tool to ExpressionEngine. I think it serves a very different purpose. And actually, if you use the right plugins, you can make it do a lot of stuff. But it was really ExpressionEngine that kind of pushed the idea of this like flexible taxonomy, this idea forward. It's essentially like an empty framework, right? We all know this. You have to create your content hierarchy based on your IA. And so that was a huge step forward in being able to build these kind of content-managed component systems. And then this has been mentioned a few times already, several talks I've been in, but there's a couple of others, I think, but like custom elements. I'm not sure if that works on E3 now, but blocks to me is by far the best. So thank you very much to Brian for taking it on and rebuilding it for ExpressionEngine. And I think I heard that we might be getting something similar natively soon. Derek was demoing some things, so we'll see what comes there. It's super exciting and very good timing for my presentation. So yeah, using a tool like this, a kind of component-driven custom block system inside a flexible CMS like ExpressionEngine allows us to, as my business card says, make things go to 11. Really, that was just an excuse to use this GIF. So if you got the Spinal Tap reference, then bonus points to you. These will go to 11. So what we're trying to do is build content-managed design systems, and that's kind of what we sell to our clients at Digital Surgeons. So how do we go about doing that? Everybody has to be on board with the idea of components from the very start. So these are some sketch wireframes from a project we're currently working on. I can't give the brand away, but you can see on the right here, we have like this big list of components. So this is very early in the project stage, as you can imagine. We're just sketching on a whiteboard. And we are building pages as a product detail page there, because these are very important pages or content types on a website. But as we're doing it, we're building out a component list. And you can see they're actually numbered. And so as we go through, it gets much, much easier to just compose these pages together using components. And I tell you, the first time, I've been kind of pushing this at Digital Surgeons for quite a while, and the first time I saw a designer like number these components like that, I shed a tear. I had a little cry. So really, we're in component bliss, right? From design, dev, content, and even our clients, they come into the room while we're wireframing like that when we can get them to. And so you really have to all be on the same page and thinking about components from the very start. For a while, we were trying to build components in dev and kind of take these page designs and try and build components out of them. But unless everybody's on the same page, it really doesn't work like that. But this is the ExpressionEngine conference, and we're here to focus on development. So I want to come out this keynote now and show you guys some of the tooling we use to build out these design systems and how we think about components all the way through the stack, from ExpressionEngine all the way through to the front end. So let's check out some code. All right. It's weird, everything's a different size. Okay. All right. You probably all recognize this. This is ExpressionEngine. So I'll start by going to our field groups. So I'll come back to team members, ignore that for a second. The important one is components. So we have a field group called components, and in there we have a field called components of type blocks. If I come into here, who uses blocks in their projects? Yeah, like a lot of people. That's awesome. So it forms the basis of how we build everything, really. So if I go in there, you can see I've got a small set of components. Now, obviously, I just built this prototype for this presentation. We have sites that have a lot more components than this. And we'll often have a few field groups that contain different components for different aspects of a site. But I wanted to kind of boil it down to the basics. So here's some components. I'll just go into them really quick. So we've got rich text is obviously the most simple, and that's just a rich text editor. Quote, you can guess how this all works. We've got a body field and an author field. Image copy, this is really common in our designs. We have image and copy, and then the direction, right? So it's like a drop down. You can choose if the image is on the left or the image is on the right. Basic stuff. CTA panel, it's like a masthead thing or a call to action somewhere on the site. So you've got background image, heading, body, the button, URL, and text, and then this toggle to say if it should be full screen or not. And then contact form. I'm just going to gloss over this one. It just has heading, body, and button text, but remember that one because there's some cool stuff coming. Okay, so that's my components field group, right? Now we'll come back to the channel manager. Again, ignore team members just for now. You see I have this pages channel. Again, just a prototype. Adrian's talk yesterday, not sure if she's in the room, was awesome on content modeling. Obviously, you need to model the content of your site. You're going to have many more channels and categories and field groups, but you tend to always have a pages channel. And we actually call them landing page builders when we sell them to our clients, right? It's a way for them to be able to create content on the fly moving forward. But we actually end up having a sort of component style blocks field, like I just showed you, in pretty much every channel. So if you kind of like imagine a product channel, you might have price and maybe a product image or something very specific to that channel, and then we'll dump the components in there too. And you can use the entry types add-on to do that and hide and show certain fields. But it just gives real flexibility to creating content. So yeah, you can imagine if I go in here, has the components field group. Okay, just look at my notes to make sure I don't miss anything. Okay, cool. So if we go to the entries now, in pages, you see I have a home page. And that is literally just made up of those components. And you can imagine in a site that has many, many more, you can, for people that don't use blocks, you can drag and drop and reorder these and add a new one, and you can essentially design in the CMS. So let's go to team members now, the thing I skipped over. So to kind of get around having rows inside blocks, or to have like grids within grids, we use relationships. So inside team members is pretty simple, just avatar and body. And then I have a team members channel where I can create all of my team members. These guys all work at DS. And then, where am I? In the team members block type, it has a heading and body, and then there's just a relationship field to relate to those team members. And so if I go to the About page, you can see I have a few different components, and then I have the team members component. And I happen to be using them all here, but I could have that component used throughout the site and just relate the ones that I need to where I need to. So that's a really handy technique that we use a lot. And then finally, I have this UI page, and we do this on all of our projects. And this simply contains every component available in every variation, right? So we have the 2 CTA panels, because one can be full screen. We have the 2 image copy components, because one can be left, one can be right. And so that's kind of used for reference and just shows you how all of the components can be handled. All right, so that's ExpressionEngine. Now I'll show you the front end, or the templating first. Well, yeah, kind of both. So this is like a slimmed down version of that boilerplate on GitHub that I mentioned earlier. I'm not going to go through all the details of the build system, but it's Webpack based, and we use PostCSS and Babel for ES6 in our JavaScript and beyond. And it's basically handling compilation for us. And we have file watchers set up, so when we make changes, everything runs and spits out our CSS. I'm sure a lot of people do that here. But this is where the real magic is happening. So we have this components directory. And inside there, we have a load of subdirectories. Some of them are purely used for front end, and so they'll just have a style sheet inside. But some of them, and you'll probably recognize the names, like quote, have an HTML file. And that is referencing the fields that we set up in ExpressionEngine, right? So we have body and author. And then this is the BEM syntax that I mentioned earlier. So it stands for block element model. And it's just a way, all it is naming conventions really, but it's just a way to think in terms of components in your CSS. So quote is the block or the component, and then this underscore syntax you use for elements. I'll come on to modifiers. And then this is a single CSS file, and just contains the CSS for that single component. So, the quote, the body, all of the elements, and some media queries for fun. Okay, and then let's look at the image copy component. So same kind of deal. It's using, spitting out the image and the copy that we're getting from ExpressionEngine. And it's also spitting out the direction here and building, this is a modifier in BEM. So you can apply a modifier to either a block or an element. It's just a way of essentially applying like a modification or a variation on something. So you can imagine image copy inner, and then the direction is going to switch them around. I'm using Flexbox, although after the talk yesterday, I feel like I should probably be using grids. Never even looked into that until yesterday, but very cool. So here, if the modifier is image copy inner, and then dash dash is the syntax for modifier, it's just going to switch the flex direction around. Cool. So I don't need to go through all of these. You can kind of imagine how it is. They have an HTML file, and they have a CSS file that goes with them. And then, as I said, we have this Webpack-based build system. Also, like I said at the beginning, we work with a number of different platforms. So that boilerplate that I showed you on GitHub gets modified for the different CMSs we work with. And so something we do here for ExpressionEngine, I won't go through all of that, but at the bottom you see here, like when the compilation is done, we have a bash script that runs, and it just moves all of those HTML files out of that root components directory and into templates partials, which we git ignore. So when we push to production, that runs and does its thing. And really, it's just so all the code for a single component is in one place. It makes it much easier for us to share them around between projects as well. And in fact, we're working now towards being able to make the components completely CMS agnostic. So if we figure out how to do that, we should be able to use the same component on different platforms, which would be pretty cool and save a lot of time. OK, templates. So here's the partials directory. You can see they're all grayed out because they get ignored. And if I show you the quote, it's exactly the same. If I changed it and the file watcher was running, it would just get updated here. We prefix them with component underscore so they don't get confused with just other partials we might be using. And then here we have the pages index file using an entries tag. And then this is how blocks works. You loop through the components. And then for each of the components, we're just calling that template partial all the way down. And this file can get big. And so if I just fire that up on the front end, it looks like this. If I go into home, might be easier to see. So you can see the components are just being spit out on the front end in the order that they're dragged and dropped into using blocks. Pretty cool. If I go to About, you see that we've got the team members coming out here. Didn't show that one, actually. I should show that. So this is how that relationship works. So the heading and body are part of the component itself, and then it's just looping through a relationship. So that gets output here. And then, those of you that are eagle-eyed, you might have noticed that we have a load of conditionals in here too. And we've taken this pretty far for some clients, like the Skillsoft one that I showed you. But this is what we use the UI page for. So basically, just in this version, just based on segment 1 being equal to UI, we output this style guide nav partial and a style guide title. And then for each component, we're outputting the name of the component as well. And then if I go to UI, you kind of generate your own content managed style guide or content managed like UI kit. Using the rich text component and then just literally putting in all of the variations of typography we have, so every heading, bulleted lists. And then as you scroll down, you get like a separation of all the components. So the CTA panels, the image copy. Here's the really simple navigation that I did. But you can imagine like how far these can be taken. For some clients, we'll hard code some stuff into, like their color palette and other information about fonts and things like that. For Skillsoft, we did some crazy stuff to like read the code behind the component and dump that onto the screen because it was aimed at developers and they could just copy and paste. So these kind of style guides is really what I'm getting at. So our clients can now go into ExpressionEngine, whichever platform, pull this up and have a reference to all of the components they can use to build out a new page. And so it works pretty well. Okay. Want to see some JavaScript? This contact form. Oh, yeah, is it a little small? Okay. How's that? Was all of that lost then? The stuff I just went through?
No, it was hard to see.
Okay. So this is the contact form component. I kind of showed you inside ExpressionEngine. It has a heading, a body, and button text. And then I have a contact form custom element. Then I'm passing that data into the custom element using attributes like this. So this data is coming from blocks and being passed into this custom element. And then this is the JavaScript for this component. And here I'm using Vue, which I think is an awesome framework. I don't know if you've played around with Vue much, but it's like a combination of React and Angular 1. It can do all the stuff that React can do. It can be taken like that far, and probably Angular 2. But it still has the stuff that we loved from Angular 1 that we lost. The real simple data attributes that you might just want to add to a legacy app or something. So it's really easy to integrate into older projects. Although React might be my framework of choice for a brand new project, Vue.js is really cool. And so this isn't, I definitely don't have time, this isn't really a presentation aimed at Vue.js, but I can kind of, we're all programmers, so I can kind of go over the high level. It's a Vue component called contact form, and that's what gives me that custom element. You specify the props, so the properties that can be passed in. It's got really good developer tools that come with it too. So if you open up Chrome DevTools and you have the right plugins installed, it will throw errors if we were passing the wrong things in and stuff like that. This is the state of the component, which is really popular in common front-end frameworks. This is a nice feature of Vue. These are computed values. So every time the state changes, these functions get run and the value gets updated. You can kind of see I'm using this for like real simple validation of the form. So return a Boolean based on whether this field has a value with a length. And email has a really simple regex here. Then I have a submit method. Doesn't do anything right now, but it would submit something somewhere. And then here I have my template. Using string literal, these are the values that are coming from ExpressionEngine. So coming out of blocks, being passed into that custom element, and then being rendered inside the render function of a Vue component. So that's the heading. This is actually the body. This is the way that you paste in markup, because it's coming from a rich text field. And then what I'm doing here, using the stuff that looks very much like Angular 1, is basically just setting up really simple validation. So this input is modeling this property on my state. And then I'm adding a BEM modifier, sticking to the BEM syntax based on whether it's valid or not. And that's basically it. So if we just go back to the home page, that's letting me do this kind of stuff. So you can see how we think about components like all the way through the stack, right? We're using blocks to think about them in the CMS. We're using BEM and PostCSS and Webpack. Webpack is a big part of it, right? It should have been on that opening slide to allow us to kind of keep everything together in a single directory and then on build, put it where it needs to go. Right through to client-side JS for interactivity. We're using Vue components in this example. So I'm coming to the end now. I wanted to show you one last thing, which I think is pretty cool. And I'll start off by going to the ExpressionEngine template. I have this pages JSON group with an index file in there. Do I do that? Yeah. And so this is the same as the pages group index file I just showed, but instead of using the template partial and outputting markup, it's outputting a block of JSON data. So I start a components array here, and then I loop through each of the components and dump out their data into an object. This can get quite tricky in ExpressionEngine at times, but I find doing it this way, using blocks, is actually really easy. You just only add that final comma if you're not on the last one. I remember having a lot of trouble rendering JSON in ExpressionEngine templates, but it seems to work fine now. Just make sure you have the right header set. There's plugins for that. And so if I go to pages-json, I get a JSON dump of all the data that's on the home page in this case. And I could go to About and get all the data from the About page. Now I think that's really cool because ExpressionEngine at that point is being used as an API management tool, or all it's thinking about is content, which is great. So then, where is it? Here. This is my React app. I'm using, like I said, a framework called Next. It's from the team at Zeit, who also do Now hosting. I don't know if anyone's familiar with that company, but the stuff they're doing is really cool. The whole idea of Now is that you can host a website by simply running the command Now. It's set up with really tight integration with Git, so every time you push code, you get a new URL, and then you can host in production there too. And then this is their framework. It's a really thin layer on top of React is just a library, so this is like a thin framework on top of React for building websites. It has server-side rendering baked in out of the box, so you're writing pure JavaScript, but everything is loaded on the server too. It's running on Node.js, so if this was a production app, this prototype, this would be a separate server somewhere. So inside Pages, it has a really easy to understand directory structure too. It's pretty cool. There's this index file. Now this is basically doing what I was doing in ExpressionEngine, just in JavaScript now. So I'm importing all of the components I'm using. These are components that are in here. I'll come on to those in a sec. Then I have my ExpressionEngine API URL here. Let's go over this stuff for a sec. Oh, no, here is where, if you know like the concept of React, basically it has this idea of props, which are it's just data that gets passed into a component. So in the same way with Vue, we were doing it in attributes. It just works slightly differently in React. So when this component is loaded, this will be called. It's fetching the data from ExpressionEngine, and then the React component that we're extending here makes it available on the properties property. Let's skip past this stuff. So then in my render function, which is responsible for rendering the DOM every time the state changes, I loop through the components in that components array that I created in the JSON. And then depending on the name, I push the required component into this components array. So I'm basically building up an array of components that are required for this page. This is using JSX. So like here's the CTA panel. Here's the image copy. And I'm passing in the data for that component via this property here, this prop. Still with me? So now I've got an array of components. I just return, this is JSX again, I just return the markup for the page. And here is the components array. And React will handle exploding that array into the various components and markup on the page. So if we dive into one of those components, start with quote, 'cause it's real simple. It's just a function. Everything in React is a component, which is basically just a function, unless you need state, and then it's a class, which is just a function anyway, under the hood. So yeah, basic stuff. You can see where I'm getting the data from here. So I guess if you want to trace it through, that data's come from ExpressionEngine, then output is JSON, and then fed into Next.js, which has passed it into this component, which is where it gets rendered, finally. Let's look at contact form. So this was fun for me to build, actually. I was in Japan last week, and I spent the entire 14-hour flight basically coding this up. And it was cool because I built the same component in React and Vue. And so you kind of get to see the differences, like side by side. And so this is doing the exact same thing, but in React. And what I noticed is there's a lot more code. So it's a React component. This is my state, a bit like the data we saw in the Vue component. I have a submit function that doesn't do anything. And then I have the render function, which renders every time state changes. You get the data from props, so this.props.data.heading. Body. I love the name of this method to put you off passing HTML around. They call it dangerously set inner HTML. And then here is where I'm doing the real simple validation. So basically, if it's valid, if it's invalid, then output this bem modifier. So you can see there's more code in here than there was in Vue, but it's basically doing the exact same thing. And to be honest, the only user interaction in that contact form is just, if you invalidate a field and it adds a class, there's so much more you can do with React and state management. So you can imagine how far this could be taken. But is this me? Yeah. I don't know why it says compiling up there. That's worrying. Hopefully. Using npm to run the app, like Antoinette showed. It says it compiled. Should be on port 5000. Cool. So yeah, this is a React app that's pulling data from ExpressionEngine. And like I said, there's a lot more you can do. Let's check this works. Yeah. Why didn't that validate? There it did. So there's a lot more you can do. And I don't see why you couldn't. We haven't done this yet, but I don't see why you couldn't build a React native app, right, that has ExpressionEngine managing the data. And I kind of see that being the future of content management, focusing solely on content and content hierarchy and content modeling, and spitting out the data as JSON for a client-side JavaScript framework to consume. And so, yeah, that's pretty much it on the code side. Oh, that's not what I wanted to do. Yeah, so I just had a couple of slides to like recap. So I went over the importance of thinking about components like right from the start of a project. Everybody has to be on board or it doesn't really work and you end up doing a lot of extra overhead on the dev side. So components super important. All the pages is a composition of those components. Design systems, speak to any of the designers or digital surgeons and they'll tell you all about the importance of design systems, but it's this idea of creating a style guide or a toolkit for clients to be able to create content. We went through ExpressionEngine configuration with the awesome blocks, post-CSS, BEM, Vue.js, and then React and Next. So I really recommend checking out Next and Now and everything Zeit does. They're awesome. I used Now to launch my site this morning, chainbaz.tech, pretty cool domain. And you can follow me on all the things at chainbaz. And then if you're interested in partnering with us or working with us at DS, then just get in touch with me today. I'll be around all night. I don't fly out till tomorrow. So if you want to geek out on React or talk about what we do at Digital Surgeons, then let me know. We have this bit.ly link too, bit.ly/letstalkds, and you can follow us on all the things at Digital Surgeons. So that's it. Thank you.